evening from San Francisco. I know there are many of you from different time zones and different parts of the world, so welcome to our Murli exploration. And today, in my discussion with my sister here, Sister Sukanya, we wanted to respond to the many requests there have been to talk about celibacy and why we practice celibacy in Raj Yoga, and also how our celibacy is really seriously different from other people's celibacy. And maybe first of all, I will clarify the difference between the celibacy that we practice and the celibacy that other people practice. And I think that the different religions practice celibacy because they say that lust is a sin. And although we do have this list of 5 vices, which includes lust, if you look at this practice, it's really pretty different from conventional religions. And so it seems to me that it's very possible, and there is a vast number of people in Brahma Kumari's Raj Yoga who approach this in a religious way, which means they approach celibacy in a religious way, which means they think they want to be celibate because not being celibate is a sin. So that's okay. But there's something else going on as well, which is quite different. And there are different ways in the Murlis in which Baba flags up the difference. For example, in religions where the people practice celibacy because of religious reasons, the people who do this are generally the monks and nuns as compared with the householders. And this applies in Christianity, in Buddhism, in Hinduism, and I think in Judaism and Islam, it's a different thing because there's not so much focus on celibacy as a way of life, but it's connected with particular festivals and periods of fasting, which include celibacy for a certain period of time. But the dilemma that the religions have is that if you make everybody celibate, then the religion will die because there will not be any more people. And so most people sorted out this situation by saying, okay, that there'll be priests or monks or nuns, and they will be celibate and everybody else not. And then we can have a certain amount of purity, and we can also continue to have continuity, and there will be new generations. Brahma Kumaris is the only spiritual practice where it is clearly stated that this is for one life only. Even though there is a possibility, and there are quite a few, who take a second or maximum a third birth as a BK, because in the 80-some years that we have been going on, there is time for that, and there is possibility for that. But otherwise, the aim and context of this practice is this is your last birth. This spiritual practice is for one birth only. And in this practice, you are very specifically preparing for your death and everybody else's death as well. And so the question of procreation doesn't arise. It's nothing to do with this practice. We're not trying to have continuity of the Brahma Kumaris beyond the immediate foreseeable future in our lifetime. So that's one big difference. And another thing that is different is that, for example, among many of the monks, the sannyasis in particular in India, and after all, we have to remember that this practice is predominantly a phenomenon for India and the Indian diaspora, and there are very few people who come from a non-Hindu background who are serious practitioners of Raj Yoga as described and defined within the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University. And as you know, this is called the knowledge of the Gita. Baba spoke about this place as a Gita Pachala, a school where you study the knowledge of the Gita. And he says very specifically that he is, Shiv Baba, the incorporeal, is the one who gives the knowledge of the Gita. And so what is the importance of celibacy? In the beginning of Brahma Kumari's movement, you can say, the question of celibacy didn't come up right away, but it did come up fairly quickly. And as soon as the matter of celibacy came up, it also produced an enormously strong reaction. And one thing that is there, which Baba gave a lot of importance to, and that is the aspect of women. Because in conventional Hinduism of that date, women were actually forbidden by the conventional social system from having the right to not get married in order to pursue a spiritual practice. And this was allowed only for the men. And the patriarchal religions, which is most of the religions, if not all of the religions, give men importance as religious leaders, and those women who do take up the practice of spirituality in the form of nuns, and they go in monasteries or convents, they are pretty much second class in comparison with the priests and monks of the same religion. And they are not considered to have that much value or importance. And in some religions, they're actually pretty much looked down upon. And so one of the things that Brahma Baba wanted to do was to enable women to have the right to pursue a spiritual practice at the highest level. And so this was a very important aspect of how he set up the arrangements. And so along with celibacy, what he also did was to form a trust, and the trustees of the trust were all young women. And this created as much reaction as the question of celibacy. So his preparation of a setup where women would have the right to do what was up until then strictly limited to men was a very revolutionary act. And the society didn't like it because it it forced everybody to consider women as having equal rights to men. And at that time, that was absolutely out of the question. Since the Second World War, this has become more and more a matter of importance, and women have been given the legal right to own property, to vote, all of these things. But otherwise, all of these activities in the society were denied to women. And in some cultures, they're still denied to women. And in some places where the religion is very extreme and extreme patriarchal, whatever rights women had have been taken away. And so women are told, you have to be pure, because if you're not, then you are reprehensible. And once you get married, you're not allowed to be pure. And you have to take a position as a usable item of property of a man who can use you however he wants. And your function is to be the instrument for procreation, and you do not have any say in the matter. So as soon as women in that context were saying, well, I choose to be celibate, you are absolutely overturning the social system just by that statement. And this is why there was so much reaction. Now we are many years on from that. And so there isn't that opposition. There is in most places, especially in the Western world, if a woman or a man decides that they want to live a celibate life and all of the other aspects of the practice of Raj Yoga, on the whole, you can do it. In India, people still experience a lot of opposition from the conventional society and from their families, but nevertheless, it is still somewhat easier than it was because of the change in social attitudes, and because the system of Raj Yoga and the organization of Brahma Kumaris has become clearly a it has credibility. It has a certain amount of power and influence, and all of these things make a big difference. Now, when it comes to the individuals who are actually practicing this, everyone is inducted into Raj Yoga through the 7-day course, and then you begin to study the Murli and practice meditation, attend the center, visit Madhuban, and so many things. And so this statement that lust is your greatest enemy, if you can conquer lust, you can conquer the world. There are many statements about it. And it is an attribute of the Brahma Kumaris practice that is extremely important for men and for women. And for example, the rules for going to Madhuban are you must have been celibate and vegetarian and practicing Raj Yoga and studying the knowledge for at least a year before you can gain admittance into Madhuban, which is a place where everyone is pure and celibate, and it has a very, very high vibration. And the aim is to keep it high. So if a person wants to do this, then it is expected that they will follow all of these disciplines, and celibacy is a very important one. And it's a commitment to celibacy for life. Whether you're married, unmarried, young, middle-aged, old, whatever it is, it's nevertheless, you decide at some point, okay, this is what you want to do. And once you've made a decision that this is what you want to do, then there will be many forms of encouragement to keep going with it. Because as soon as you do this, you are saying to the forces of what we call Maya to come along and give you opposition. You get opposition from your own body, you get opposition from your mind. There are all sorts of natural tendencies in any human being that you want to fulfill your function as a sexual being, to procreate. You want to come into a relationship where you are a couple, part of a couple. You may decide, no, I want to have children and I don't want to do this anymore, or whatever it is. But there are many people who already have children, and then they come into this and they decide, okay, we will continue with our married life and we will be celibate. And sometimes one member of the couple will want to be celibate and the other one will not. And so then you have to work that out with your partner, how you're going to do this. And so different people will work it out in different ways. And that is not really what we're going to talk about here. But what we want to talk about is what it really is to practice celibacy. And I really don't think we practice celibacy because not being celibate is bad and sinful and you shouldn't do it because of that reason. I don't think that's what this is about at all. If you are a religious type of person, you would take it in that way, no doubt. But I think there's something else going on, which is actually much more interesting and much more meaningful, which makes it much more doable, because you're not putting yourself in a situation where you're fighting against your natural physical, emotional, social urges and nature. But to me, something else is going on altogether. And one thing to compare, which I think is quite interesting, is the sannyasis, the monks who leave their wives and children if they're already married and they decide to take up sannyas. And Baba says, okay, you want to be celibate, but the reason you want to be celibate actually does not constitute pure karma, because you're saying that you cannot be around a woman and not be sexually activated. And so you are putting the blame on the woman for your sexuality. And so you punish the woman for your own weakness. And that's actually a negative karma, because the woman is just beautiful and she's there, but it's not her fault that you're attracted. And so you can't really get away with that. Then the other thing is, from a karma point of view, Baba made it very clear that if you get married to a girl, and you produce children through her, you have a responsibility. You have to stay with her and the children, and you have to take care of them and protect them and raise them. And if you go away, this is dereliction of duty, and you expose your wife to very severe situation in the community because she will not be treated well. She doesn't have the right to earn, so she will have to get by earning very little through very menial tasks. She will be looked down on in the society. The children will be considered orphans. They will have a hard time. And so the sannyasi will clock up a vast amount of negative karma in the name of being pure. And so Baba, God, is not impressed by that logic where they say, we're going because these people are making us impure, and so we're going to go away, and they can fend for themselves. So in Brahma Kumaris, that's never allowed. If a girl is not married and there are other siblings, sisters, brothers in the family, or even if there aren't, from the point of view of the philosophy of karma, she's under no obligation whatsoever to look after her parents. And yet the social attitudes always tell the girls, oh, you are a financial obligation, a burden on us. She's not actually, but they say that. And you have to go and get married. So they really don't like the girls to stay at home. They want her to go somewhere else. But if she wants to go, from the point of view of Hindu law, nobody can stop her. But the society is very cruel towards women who have this desire or intention to live a spiritual life. And so Baba created the system of centers so that women could do this. And there's a place where she is safe, and it commands the respect of the society, and then everything is okay for her. And she does spiritual service. And this is compared with women who become doctors or become social workers, and they may not get married, but they sustain themselves through their jobs in the field of medicine, or also teachers, or also social workers. This is kind of allowed for women. But otherwise, these patriarchal societies force the women into marriage, and in their marriages, their function is to be an instrument for reproduction and taking care of children and the house. And they're under a lot of restrictions, and they're not necessarily respected very much. And one thing that Baba very often says to the girls is, as a virgin, you will be bowed to. This is the system in Hinduism. They revere the virgin's purity, has a very high, is very highly regarded in Christianity and Judaism and Islam and in Hinduism and Buddhism. But if a girl is beyond a certain age, then they force her into marriage and force her to adopt a social position where she has to bow to everyone. And so Baba will sometimes say, look, if you do this, then you will have to bow to everyone. And if you remain pure, everyone will hold you in high regard, because purity has that that impact on people, and people revere it. And then he talks about the different goddesses who are all described as virgins. And if you look at Christianity, the Virgin Mary is very important. Her virginity is important. And she has a child by divine intervention, but she's still a virgin. And in the Mahabharata, there are stories about different gods wanting to consummate a relationship with a woman, and they'll say, we will consummate this relationship, but you will retain your virginity. So they say it like that. And so this is something that's there in all of the cultures, the great importance of virginity of the woman and purity of the woman. And then also in all the religions, it is generally clearly stated that if you want to have a life with God, that presumes a commitment to celibacy. So, for example, in Christianity, the priests have to make a commitment, a vow of celibacy, the monks, the nuns, everybody who says, I want to make spiritual life my focus, they have to make a vow of celibacy. And so that means there's something there in it that may be inexplicable or incomprehensible. And in my connection with people who are living spiritual lives in other religions and who have made a commitment to celibacy, they have a difficult time maintaining it on the whole. And there is a belief that, you know, to be celibate without having a lot of difficulties is a gift from God, like a form of grace. And very, very few people have that, but most have a hard time with it. And you get a lot of stories about pedophilia and other types of sexual activity because the people who made those commitments are not able to sustain it, especially the men. The women are naturally more easily able to maintain celibacy, but it's a lot more difficult for the men. And yet, on the whole, it is only the men who are allowed to lead a spiritual life by the patriarchal religions, and the women are denied that right, even though it's actually easier for women. And in Brahma Kumaris, in general, there's more women who are doing this practice than men. And so that's partly because it comes more easily to women than to men. In a general way, not in every case by any means. What is the point for us in practicing celibacy? What do we accomplish by doing that? So first of all, it's connected with yoga. And Baba says, if you are in a sexual relationship with someone, then you get very, very tied to that person karmically, because the act of sexual activity causes you to be bound to that soul and also bound to the body. And when you engage in sexual activity, it also drains out your spiritual energy. And so from that angle, it's counterproductive to the intention of the practice. And the intention of the practice is that you want to finish your karmic connections with people, your karmic debts, your karmic bondages, So if you create new ones when you're trying to finish the existing ones, it's a bit illogical. You're doing the opposite of what your stated goal is. And so that doesn't make sense. And then the other thing is that you become bound emotionally and psychologically to your sexual partner. And one of the things that happens in this period of time, which is also called the time of reckoning, is that the outstanding karmic accounts that exist between people play out by this very, very strong attraction between people of opposite sex or the same sex or whatever it happens to be, depending on your orientation. But the attraction and getting bound together, especially through sexual activity, and the emotional involvement that goes with that, it creates something that causes the attraction at a certain point where you're fully tied up to become repulsion. And this is where the relationship can become violent, verbal abuse, physical abuse. Sometimes it happens very, very frequently that the girl who goes into a family is abused by her husband, other of his brothers, uncles, father, and the in-laws, and there's a lot of stories of ill treatment because she's completely at their mercy, and they're supposed to be considering her as Lakshmi, who has come to the house, and honor her, and so on. And of course, that happens a lot of the time, but by no means all the time. And because it's a matter of karmic accounts getting settled, it very quickly degenerates and becomes a matter of a lot of suffering. And also, the situation where there is no possibility for her to decide when she has children, how many children she has. This is all imposed on her, and it may cause her a great deal of suffering to have to give that many births and go through the pain and pressure. And if she gives birth to a girl, then there's a lot of negative repercussion because everybody wants boys. And so there's a lot of social damage that is done, psychological damage, physical damage, and cruelty. And of course, it happens also to the men who find themselves in a similar situation where their wives abuse them emotionally, physically, or whatever. But on the whole, the woman is more vulnerable than the man in this social setup. And so therefore, Baba gave a lot of attention to what happens to girls, and that if you want not to have that, you have a right to not have that. If you want to lead a spiritual life, you have that right. And so he made all the arrangements, and the society didn't like it because, they couldn't countenance that a girl would think for herself and decide for herself. That was absolutely not allowed. And they really, really went against that and went against Brahma Baba for setting it up. But he was able to get through all that. And now it is a very flourishing organization with many centers and many men and women who are following the practice. But at the same time, there is constant opposition from the inside. And it is said in the Gita, lust is your greatest enemy, because there isn't anything that will oppose your spiritual effort to become free from matter, from karmic accounts, from just the need for human company, intimate human company. All of this will be continuously opposing you. And so God says, this is the nature of the practice. And if you do what I tell you, and if you cultivate all relationships with me, you will have enough strength to neutralize all of this, because all this is the impact of bondage, negative karma, and so on from your previous 63 births. That's a lot of births. And you don't know the history of your 84 births, of which 63 are spent in circumstances where you have accumulated a lot of karmic accounts and a lot of burden of negative karma. So this negative karma wants to come up for settlement. And so there is this machinery of the magnetic force of being drawn to someone or some people where there are karmic accounts to be settled. And a lot of it takes the form of sexual attraction and getting caught up in a sexual relationship and then getting disconnected from God as a result of that. So what else is going on in our practice of celibacy? Okay, let us say you have made yourself free. You have been practicing celibacy. Why are you practicing celibacy? You're practicing celibacy because it's a very essential ingredient in establishing your independence from depending or being under the influence or under the sway or under the power of any human being, man, woman, child, elder, whatever it is. You cannot be a king if you're under anyone's influence. It means if anyone has any power over you. And definitely for a woman in a sexual relationship with the man will do whatever he can to establish that he's the boss and he has power over you and you are under him. And that's the nature of the game. And there will be some women who are very seductive and are able to turn the tables and be the boss and have a man around her little finger, but that's a minority. Majority is the other way around. And a woman who is interested in leading her life in that way is not going to be particularly interested in doing this kind of practice. But the women who do come into this kind of practice definitely have karmic accounts, definitely have been trained from birth to be under a male and to be under a dominant female mother-in-law type, which I call patriarchal women, and there are many who are like this. And so it's something that she has to be pretty strong in her intention to be free and independent. And what happens when you're free and independent is that you're alone. And you're alone because when you're really totally alone and you turn your attention to God, there isn't anything there to get in the way. So making yourself alone is actually quite an important aspect, and dispossessing yourself and working through your emotional and psychological and all of these things, this kind of inner work to gain your freedom, to gain your independence, and to gain your assertiveness, because you have to effectively function on your own reconnaissance. And in circumstances where there will always be a fair amount of disapproval, opposition, and constantly people will be trying one way or the other to take you down. And that's just the nature of the game. So definitely this is something for someone who is strong and whose potential for being strong is there. The seed of that is there. And then you can grow that seed and make it flourish. And you have to pass through many different types of tests and betrayals and this and that and the other. But if you do that, you become a person of substance, and your purity is a very powerful energy that you exude, and that people really do feel and respect, and is something that you build up over time. Why are we especially wanting to build up this power of purity? Partly it's to do with the sanskara of living as a pure human being, which is called a deity, for your next 21 births, where you do not need to procreate through sexuality. Procreation through sexuality occurs when the human being loses that kind of power. And the function and purpose of Raj Yoga is to acquire that kind of power and to have it to such an extent that you can function and reproduce for 21 births without needing to use the regular system of sexual procreation. And that is the real reason why we practice purity. So one is to be able to be seriously a king, an independent, totally non-dependent person. The only one who is over you is God. The only one who is your judge is God. And you are establishing that, and asserting your right to practice purity is a very, very important ingredient in establishing that, if that's what you want. And, different people are doing this for different reasons, definitely. And everyone's take on celibacy is definitely different, one from another. As I said, majority of people think about it as a religious approach where you want to be celibate, definitely to be close to God, and you consider not being celibate is a form of sin, and so you don't want to do that because it's a sin. But there are not very many people who are not really concerned about whether it's a sin or not, but who really want to acquire that independence and that power of purity and that energy of yoga, which allows you not only to procreate without physical, sexual, reproductive methods, but you can do many, many, many other things, which are all called siddhis. There's powers, different kinds of yogic powers, because you have to have the power of your energy to keep everything in harmony and everyone in harmony, because that is what a king does. You keep everyone harmony, you keep everyone, you're the protector, you are the provider, you are the carer, and you create an atmosphere of security and love and beauty. And in that way, your energy sustains the world. And the image for that is Vishnu. And the image of Vishnu is the symbol of the achievement of Brahma Baba and Jagat Amba Saraswati, who were together as the mother and father of the Yagya, and absolutely celibate, and absolutely recognizing each other with deep, pure, platonic love for each other. And this platonic love that is developed between those people who are the children of Shiv Baba, the children of Brahma Baba, the Brahma Kumars and Kumaris who are doing the practice of Raj Yoga at this level, they are alone with God, but they're also with each other in community. And it is a gathering of very empowered people. And this is something extraordinary. And it specifically ends in the death of this body. And having achieved this condition, which is called Sato Pradhan, and for which this practice of purity is very important, because you want to finish off all your karmic accounts of 63 births. That takes a lot of power, because you have to pay, and you pay through the this energy of yoga, which enables you to get through one thing after another, after another, after another, until all your bondages are finished, you are free, everything is settled, you're home free. And also you acquire a lot of yogic powers. We talk about the 8 powers, which you know very well, the development of virtues, the condition of being non-violent, paramodharma, non-violence. You have moved from Tamo Pradhan to Tamo to Rajo to Sato Pradhan. You've been through this entire purification process. And so the practice of celibacy is absolutely connected with that. If you don't practice celibacy and all the other various disciplines that we do, you're unlikely to achieve the result of the practice of Raj Yoga, because it includes all of this. And the result is that you become immortal, you become invincible, you become absolutely yourself, you become androgynous. You are totally balanced in your masculinity and your femininity, because you know you will have 42 births male, 42 births female, and you have all sorts of roles to play. And for that, you need all sorts of good sanskaras. You're discovering yourself along the way. And this ingredient of the power of purity enables you to be completely connected with God. As long as there's any bondage, emotional bondage, physical bondage, any kind of bondage where your mind goes to someone, then you cannot be totally with God. But if you systematically break all those bondages and fulfill all of the recommendations that God is giving, then you will be like this with God. And that is what this is about. And the reward of that is He will say, okay, I give you the full inheritance. And the primary inheritance is the knowledge. And the knowledge is about the soul, the supreme soul, karma, pure karma. And if you are not practicing celibacy, then you're doing such a karma that puts you in bondage. And so it's completely meaningless to do this and not be celibate. And the thing is, if somebody doesn't want to be celibate, what will God say? God will say, that's okay, that's up to you. But then the consequences and the achievement that's possible through this practice, you will not be able to have it because you have blocked it by not being celibate. And so it's all very clearly laid out. And it's not laid out really in terms of you're a good person or you're a bad person. It's simply laid out that if you want to do this, these and these and these are the things you need to do, because if you don't do them, you won't be able to get this. And it's fairly straightforward. It's nothing to do with threats or shame or blame or anything like that, which is very much present in the religious environment. But in spirituality, it's really outside the range of the religious environment, because the religions tend to be punitive. Everything is looked at, this is good, this is bad. If you do a bad thing, we're going to punish you. That's okay. But, you know, we don't need to be in that. That's not what this is about. And definitely, you don't allow any human being to get into a position where they judge you. And when you are practicing purity at this level, they will be very afraid to try and do that, because the impact of your purity will make them feel their impurity. And so sometimes when a person is really practicing purity at this level, people don't like it, because it makes them aware of their own impurity, and they don't want to hear about that or feel it. But that's not really your problem, that's their problem. God is saying, I'm offering you this. I'm giving you everything you need to know to achieve this, and so you can go for it.
Om Shanti. Thank you for elaborating on this topic, which keeps needing clarity from time to time. One of the question is that often in the Murli it is said falling into vice, and it is referred to the vice of lust. All the vices are connected with matter, connected with body consciousness. So why is this particular vice of lust given the primemost category of vice?
Yeah, this is because it is the most effective way of putting you in bondage. Anger will not do it. Attachment will not do it. None of the other vices will do to you what lust will do. And none of the others will drain your spiritual energy the way that lust will do it. And so it's flagged up, and that's why.
Often these two words, lust is translation for the word calm in Hindi. So calm and kamna. Kamna is desire, passion. They have the same root.
They do, because there's a game that goes on, and it starts with attraction. And if you think of all the things that are beautiful clothes, beautiful car, beautiful shoes, beautiful device. And very often in advertising or in business, they say, oh, this is a very sexy car, or this is a very sexy house, or something like this. And so this indicates that these are accoutrements that you add to yourself to make yourself more attractive sexually, because it's all about the conquest. A man wants to conquer a woman wants to conquer a man, and then when you've conquered, then you think, that's great, I'm the victor. And what Baba is saying is that this is a trap, and it puts you into bondage, it puts you into different kinds of suffering. Because if you think about the stories of people who are really very engaged in the whole thing of falling in love and the high that goes with it, and the ecstasy, the flip side is a fair amount of agony with strong sexual attraction. It will fizzle out after some time. And if a relationship begins purely sexually, it will not last long unless you really build up other aspects of the relationship. And after that part is over, there's nothing left. So if you don't build something more solid, in Greek, there are these words, eros, philos, logos. And eros, the word in English is erotic. All of this interest in pornography and sex shops, and the internet is packed full of this because people just want it. It's a huge addiction. Very, very few people remain monogamous. One of the difficulties that people have in marriages is the partner has other families, other affairs. And so there is this experience of betrayal, the experience of jealousy, the experience of neglect, the experience of being used and abused, and all of these things. And with all of that come all the other vices. And if you decide that you're going to use this life to make yourself free, make yourself pure, and you make a commitment to celibacy, you're actually saving yourself from going through all of that rigmarole in order to finally say, yeah, no, that's not it. What I really want is the love of God. Well, you could have had that in the first place, but okay, whenever you get it, that is the thing that really sustains you. Because you see, when people are drawn to another person, it's because they want their energy. So sexual relations are actually quite predatory in very many cases. And there are many people who are able to have a very good relationship. And people who have that, they usually say that the sexual part, they finished that quite quickly. And then they got on with the other aspects of the relationship, which is really mutually beneficial, caring, and loving, and they don't take possession of each other and things like this. But if you look at that in terms of the world population, that's just a few like that. But the majority are fairly catastrophic arrangements. Dysfunctional family. The majority of people are raised in dysfunctional family. And then when children of dysfunctional families try to have their own families or get into their own relationships, they don't really have any background of how to have a good, balanced, healthy relationship. And they get into big trouble. And we see that all over the place. So this is actually quite a good choice to say, okay, let me decide to have a celibate life so that I can sort out all the other parts of my life. And interestingly, when people are in addiction recovery programs, whether it's for narcotics or alcohol, or now there's a lot of sexual addiction. Part of the addiction process is do not engage in a relationship, an intimate relationship, until you've sorted out all the rest. And that's very interesting because it's part of it. And I think that a soul who's had 84 births, of which 63 are all full of all kinds of dramas and getting into all sorts of negative karmic accounts. You have one birth in which to sort it all out. It makes sense to me that you keep yourself to yourself and work through all your stuff. And then there you are, a balanced, free, a wise individual, and then you can start your new cycle. And the new cycle that is coming, which we call the golden age, this is a society of men and women in families with children, but without all of this baggage. And they have the power to procreate through what he calls the power of yoga. He doesn't give details about it. And some people want to know. And he says, you'll know when the time comes, but first things first. So, okay.
We are talking about purity here, ultimately. Purity has so many facets. Purity in thoughts, words, actions, wealth, giving and receiving wealth, things, stuff, so on and so forth. So many facets about that. So could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, when Baba says you can practice celibacy, in the process of that, you find a lot of the other things that he's talking to us about, it fits with it. It goes with it. And if you have this physical celibacy, and then on that you build all the other kinds of attributes of nonviolence, of being in equanimity in the face of the pairs of opposites, your words, your thoughts, your intentions, your motivations, all of these things are built on that really very powerful foundation of physical celibacy. But if your physical celibacy is not done on the base of the power of yoga, then you will be doing repression. And when you repress yourself sexually, which he mentions quite a lot for the sannyasis who do repress themselves because they don't have yoga with God, they don't have contact with God, they don't believe in God, they are repressing themselves. And so when somebody does that, then it becomes violence because the energy has to come out somewhere. Whereas in the celibacy that we do, all of the energy is raised, you see, and it goes to the crown. And you're, if you could see, you have a huge flame on top of your head. So the energy is up. And if you repress that, there's no flow. This they call kundalini, but in hatha yoga, but this is also there. And we are functioning here, here, here. And everything from the below is purified and raised up. And it's a very seriously powerful energy. And he is teaching us to do this. And he says, use this to purify every attribute of your character, because this is how you become the deity that he talks about. The purpose of Raj Yoga is to change from an ordinary mortal to an immortal. And that is not just particularly easy or simple or ordinary. How many people will do that? This is not for the masses. This is special. And everyone is offered an invitation, an opportunity to do it. And you can do it at the level that you're comfortable with. And that's absolutely fine. Nobody says otherwise. But the highest level is described so that you can come there or somewhere near there or not too near. It's really up to you. This is an entirely voluntary program. And this is also why no one really has the right to wag any finger at anyone. That doesn't make sense as a religious approach. And I don't think we need to do it that way. I don't think it's so effective. And it does put people in a mentality of repression. And if you have had a religious life until you come into Raj Yoga, it'll be a default mentality or a default position, that self-repression. And one has to get past that, because that won't work for this,
So with churning of the knowledge, spiritual knowledge that Baba is revealing, bringing that into our day-to-day thinking, practice, yoga with Baba, through that subtlety of understanding, that is how the power builds up. And That's how all the elements of our life get purified. Right?
Well, when you churn the Murli, you're decoding it because there are a lot of secrets in there, and they will be revealed to you personally by the Murli, by Baba, however this works, depending on how you work with the knowledge, because your consciousness has to get changed. There's a great shift of consciousness that has to happen. So you're remembering Baba, you're churning, you're doing pure karma, you're freeing yourself from all your bondages, and you're going into unknown territory. It is unknown territory, and it's really between you and God. And the advantage of having other yogis around you or more experienced yogis around you is that if your relationship with this unknown territory becomes confusing, you have somebody who can say, oh, don't worry about this is normal, keep going, something like that. That's important.
The last question really that came up in the chat was, why doesn't Baba lay it out simply? Why do we have to decode it?
Well, because it's nothing like the Republic of Heaven. It's a kingdom, and it's a school. And he keeps on saying number wise. And so he gives everybody what you need, but everyone will work with it however they work with it. And the way that they work with it determines the results. There's an exam, there are exams all the time, and you're finding out who you are, and nobody is equal. Everyone is equally a point of light. Everyone is equally a brother and a sister, or a sister. And your relationship as a brother and sister is love and regard. You don't have any obligation. And there are all kinds of people, classmates in the classroom, and we're all studying, but everyone understands it their own way. Everyone interprets it their way, and people who are of a similar level recognize each other, and they feel each other, they relate to each other, they move along, and that's how it is. I don't think we can say why it's like that. We can just say it is like that. That's it, really. Let's finish with just a moment of silence, and I hope this has been useful for you. Om Shanti.